plus my own businesses, particularly in Auckland. Why did I stand for the New Conservative? Well, to be fair, I didn't really know a lot about the New Conservative Party about 4 or 5 months ago, but a friend of mine in one of the bands that I'm in, we talked about it. She said, have you heard of the New Conservative? And I said, not really. And she said, well, have a look on the website, have a look at the policies and see what you think. So I did that, and I found myself nodding in agreement with nearly all of the policies and thinking, well, that makes sense. That's a good idea. Why don't we do that? So she said, would you like to join the local committee, which I did. And about 2 weeks after I joined the committee, they said, well, would you like to stand for the Palmerston North electorate as the New Conservative candidate? And I said, gee, you guys must really hate me. But I'm very proud to do that. Great bunch of people. I enjoy what the party stands for. One of the main policies that attracted me was the pro-life stance of the New Conservative Party. Now, some people think that we're anti-abortion. We are pro-life. There is a difference. We understand from time to time, in those rare occasions, abortion has to happen. Disappointing, but it does have to happen sometimes medically. But we don't like the legislation that's been passed by the current government through the House. And it was done around the lockdown period. And we believe the fact that the abortion legislation moves from the legal legislation to the health legislation is not a good idea. We don't believe the baby now has the protection of the Crimes Act. And we believe that's a very, very bad thing. The status of the embryo now is one of a cyst or a tumour, not a human being. We believe that's got to be changed. We just don't like that at all. Very briefly, in a nutshell, we're against the marijuana legislation as well. We don't believe New Zealand needs another drug to screw up people in this country. Some people get away with it successfully, but too many don't. And we would rather support families and grow healthy families with a future where they can go to work, where they can earn a living, where they can support families, have their own families, grandparents can have grandchildren, and we can have a really good, healthy country. And get back to some good old-fashioned values. If you're thinking about who you're going to vote for this time, can I just ask you to think about your own values? What do you believe in? What is important to you? What are the values that you've held close through your life? And have a look at the other parties, by all means, and then make a decision on the party that closely reflects the values that you stand for. You've got a pretty big choice. Several parties out there you can vote for. All I'm asking you is to look at those parties whose values closely or most closely reflect your own. If you have an opportunity, look on the New Conservative website. The policies are all there. We have policies on justice, health, education, right through the entire gambit. And it's interesting that we've probably had our highest polling in the last couple of days on the party vote. If you can't give me your electorate vote, I would ask you certainly to give me your party vote, because I think what we need in Parliament is a party that represents and listens to the people. Was that the bell? It was the bell? Good. All right. So I'm fearful of that font opening up, so I'll finish very, very briefly. Just again, look on the website, look at the policies, and I'm sure, like me, you'll go through them and think, yes, these make a lot of sense. Some of them are very different to what we've had, but then what we've had over the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years in New Zealand, have they truly worked? I don't think so. But look at those policies. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the evening.
I'm wondering if I can wander over here or not. Kia ora tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. My name is Tiano Tuiono. I'm your Green Party candidate for Palmerston North. It's very lovely to be here. It's a lot warm and fuzzy inside. Warm because it's raining outside, and fuzzy because actually I've misplaced my glasses. So if I look at you intently, it's because you've asked a really good question, or I can't focus on you very well. It's great to be back here at St Albans. I think the last time I was here I had kids that were at the holiday program. It was a success. They came home and built Noah's Ark in my lounge. So thank you for that, holiday program people. A little bit about myself. I'm trained in law and have global experience in human rights work, particularly at the UN. I work at the intersection of Indigenous people's rights and the environment. I've worked on every continent around the world, except for Antarctica, still working on that. Africa, South America, around the Pacific, Europe and Asia. The last piece of work I did was as part of a human rights mission to the Philippines, working in a human rights coalition with different church organisations, human rights organisations, NGOs and trade unions. And that was like looking at and investigating the extrajudicial killings under the Duterte regime, and that was in December. We put our report together to the Human Rights Council earlier this year. I also do some work nationally as well, so I participated in helping to draft the interfaith document on to the Select Committee on the Zero Carbon Act, and it gave me a really strong insight to the different leadership with some of the leadership in our city around the different Christian denominations and how they could frame it from a faith-based perspective. The notion that humans are passed down from God, the manner, if you like, to look after this planet for this generation and the generations to come as well. So I appreciated working on that piece of that submission as well. My work, as a paid job, I work in education. I've done that for 20 years. Policy, I'm currently working in education publishing. So I've written books, do videos, working in professional development, working as part of a social enterprise as well. So I've had about 20 years doing that, and it's taken me all over the place as well. Have a particular focus on Māori medium education. So my children go to the Kura Kaupapa on Grey Street. I might be the only person on stage who can actually speak Māori, so I'm a fluent Māori language speaker as well. And so the Green Party is committed to Te Tiriti. Te Tiriti of Waitangi has four key principles: ecological wisdom, social responsibility, appropriate decision-making, and non-violence. So this election, I'm asking you to party vote Green, and there's 3 reasons why you want to do that, or why I want you to do that. The first reason is maths. 2 is better than 1. Party voting Green could send you a strong new voice from Palmerston to Parliament. If you watched the poll last night, we're tracking at around about 6%. I'm number 8 on the party list, so that could send me to Parliament. So if you're, so that your basic maths is 2 is better than 1. A strong party vote will get me there and very likely into government. Second reason, Greens are a proven positive partner in government. We've delivered 3 strong years supporting Labour to be their best selves in response to COVID, Christchurch and many of the other challenges and opportunities that this government has faced. We've gotten quite a lot done on the way. The Zero Carbon Act, $1.3 billion in jobs for nature, and $14 million of those jobs are actually over at Horizons, and there's probably some more out there as well. So if you are looking for work, jobs in nature is a place you might want to go check out. World first legislation for domestic violence leave and big moves in pay equity, just to name a few. Your third reason, the Greens are about tackling the big issues. It's about long term, and the thing about the long term, it's certainly become the short term. So that's issues around climate change. I'm mindful at the beginning of this year we had the Australian bushfires. Over in California was burning, the Arctic was burning last year. So climate change is it the bell? All right.
That's your end point.
Is that my end point? All right, okay. So COVID-19 has shone a glaring light on the inequalities on our society, but it's also shown that we can make big changes fast when we work together. And that's why I want you to party vote Green this election.
Kia ora ana koutou. I'm Tangi Utikere, your Labour Party candidate for Palmerston North, and I will be a fresh, strong and effective local voice for this community in its city, in Parliament and in government. And I will be that strong voice because I have the proven track record and I have the experience to deliver for this city. I was born here, educated here at Parkland Primary, Rossin Intermediate Normal, then Freiburg, before going on to Massey and then to Teachers College. I started my professional career in education as a local secondary school teacher for 12 years before moving into local government, along with experience as a decision maker within the criminal justice sector. So for me, Palmerston North is my tūranga waiwai, the place that my wider family and I proudly call our home. And I am so proud of it and its people. I am Palmy proud. I have provided service and leadership for this community as a city councillor for 10 years and as the city's deputy mayor for the last 4 years. That means I know this community. I know that our strengths lie in education and training, in logistics and distribution, in healthcare and in a strong government sector, a diversified private sector and a solid public one as well. And I have strong local connections as a leader amongst JPs through my work chairing a school board of trustees, along with my support of city community organisations. I have to say I'm proud of the competent leadership of our Prime Minister and Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, and the Labour team and government as we navigate through the toughest times in modern history. The Labour Party has the leadership, but we also have a plan for delivery as we move from responding to recovering and rebuilding as a community and as a nation. And our 5-point economic recovery plan is quite simple. Firstly, it's around investing in our people. Secondly, it's around job creation. Thirdly, it's around preparing for our future, making sure that we future-proof our economy. Number 4 is around support for small business, entrepreneurs and innovators. And number 5 is recognising our global position in the world. So Labour has a plan to keep people working, to get things moving and put us on the best path to growth and recovery. Our plan looks ahead to the longer term to rebuild our economy and find ways to do things differently and better. That's what a Labour government offers you at this election. A Labour government has proven that it can deliver for this city and its community. That, along with my own proven track record and experience, will allow me to be a representative who will continue to be accessible, continue to be visible, and continue to be an advocate for Palmerston North as its local Member of Parliament. I invite you to 2 Ticks Labour on the 17th of October. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora koutou katoa. It is a pleasure to finally be here tonight. I'm pretty sure this debate's been postponed not once but twice already, so a huge thank you to Trevor and his team for putting this together. I'm here for a pretty simple reason. In my worldview, I don't think somebody should complain about something if they're not ready to put their hand up and do something about it. And I don't want to look back in 20 years and wish that I had made a difference for our city and for our community. I was selected last year by a group of 60 members of your community, business people, teachers, councillors and local leaders. And it's not too often a group of people that perhaps have an average age of 65 plus choose an 18-year-old to represent them. But in my view, no age group has a monopoly on good ideas. The next 20 years are going to shape our country's future, and the next 3 are going to define what we are going to be able to do. We are taking on record levels of debt, $200 billion over the next 3 years. That is an insurmountable figure. And it's often framed up that my generation will be the ones paying for it. And yes, to a degree that's true. But actually there's many of you here today who will never see a New Zealand without that debt, which is a sobering thought if you ask me. I've been New Zealand's top youth policy developer, one of our top youth diplomats representing our country overseas in Australia not once but twice, and being one of the first New Zealand teams to ever place at the Evatt Diplomacy Competition. I've been on local youth council here in town, working to provide scholarship opportunities for incredible young people on all range of skills, whether that be in the arts, whether that be in academics, whether that be in sports. I have seen problems in our community and I have worked towards fixing them. There were no opportunities for debating for anybody over year 11 and onwards. So rather than looking at it and putting it in the too hard basket, I started a competition that now has 22 teams and 8 different schools involved. I'm a believer that when we see problems in this country, when we see problems in our community, we need to put our hands up and we need to fix them. Our community's been left off the map for far too many years, in my view, by MPs which have not put our city first. There's a brand new project being developed that was just re-announced the other day, a new distribution hub going to be put outside of our city near Bunnythorpe. The idea being to take heavy freight trucks off our streets and to unlock some of our distribution potential. The problem with this government is that they've then deemed building the Palmerston North Ring Road a non-essential project. Now, what does that mean? That means that we take all of the trucks out of our city, we take all of that freight off our roads, and have them drive straight back through 8 years later because there is no bypass around our city. So what I've announced and what Judith Collins and I have worked on is a $200 million plan to build the Palmerston North Ring Road, help not only unlock some of our distribution sector's potential, but make our streets safer for pedestrians and for cyclists. We are going to invest in community housing providers because it sickens me and it hurts me to my core when I hear that we've got 105 children in our community who are going to school out of hotels and not a single Kiwi-built home has been built. Not a single promise has been made about fixing that in our city, and that is something I'm passionate about. That is something I am going to do. We are going to invest in our community providers. We are going to repeal and replace the Resource Management Act to get our developers moving, and we are going to fix the crisis that is facing our city. We're also going to work for businesses, but I'll talk to you more about that later. So thank you very much. I'm William Wood, and if you want a strong, new voice for our city, which is going to get us on the map, Party Vote National and electorate vote for Wood.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me out there? Excellent. My name is Anthony Willems. I'm actually the New Zealand First candidate for Rangitikei, but currently my colleague and friend Derek Ball is on the campaign bus with our leader Winston Peters up north and doing a fine job. So he asked me to fill in for him and come and speak to you tonight. Thank you for coming out in the rain. Tēnā koutou katoa. Here we are today. I'm speaking to you. I was born in Wanganui. I live in Ashurst. I'm former military. I was out here at Linton a number of years ago, backwards and forwards. I've also worked overseas. I'm a registered nurse and I'm a paramedic. I've worked in hospitals and healthcare organisations up and down this country and overseas. I worked for NATO and I returned last year living with my wife and daughter out at Ashurst. I returned last year to look after my mother and look at the health system. I was appalled, not just at the health system, but the infrastructure of this country. New Zealand First, I'm here to remind you tonight to party vote New Zealand First. It's no offence to my esteemed colleagues, but we've actually been sitting in the engine room of this coalition government for the last 3 years, rebuilding this country after the slash and burn of 9 years of other governments and the governments before that. We are the ones that put the new hub, transport hub out there, push that along. We're the ones that pushed the Provincial Growth Fund. We're the ones that have got the shovel-ready projects up and down this country. We're the ones that have been, even in this time of COVID-19, we're the ones who are pushing for our, still with our exports into Europe, Brexit. We are the second largest current trading partner for our weight and our aid and our size with America. We are doing this all the time. We're working with the Australians. We're going to make this country work again. You want to keep the momentum running. We've done it for 3 years. We can do it again, and we're only partway through the job. You need us back in the government. You need us back in there keeping them honest. We are the only pragmatic ones. We are the ones with the background, the common sense, and the understanding of how to make this run. We have the best Foreign Affairs Minister with our leader, Winston Peters. He's done a fantastic job. Ron Mark, he was the best Defence Minister. This area, not just Palmerston North, but the Manawatu area, right through into the Rangitikei, right? The background we have with our military and defence personnel, that's all our farming people, our education, our systems. We've been the ones putting that money back in there. We will be the ones there for you. Party vote New Zealand First. It's a privilege and honour to be here tonight. Looking forward to speaking some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take this, Mike? Oh, yep, sure.
This is new for me to have notes. Some of you may have seen me with a megaphone and a wireless mic in the square. So my name is Sharon Lyon, and I'm here with one of the fastest growing parties in New Zealand history. Why am I here? I'm here as a mother, a grandmother, and as a concerned citizen of New Zealand. I have been part owner of Hayden Manor twice, once in 2000 and recently bought it back in 2017. I've been an educationist for 43 years, an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, mainly too a lover of New Zealand and the Kiwi way of life, which I believe is seriously under threat at this time. I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't think so. When it came to the announcement of a pandemic, I too was very concerned like the rest of New Zealand, and I thought our government was doing a fantastic job. Flattening the curve, however, has really resulted in flattening the economy. I do believe there are more suicides in our community than there are even the potential risks of COVID deaths. I believe too that looking at not the projections but what actually happened, the actual data, that there is for healthy New Zealanders no more risk of dying of COVID probably as me winning lotto. So, the reason that I am here is basically we are offering an alternative to what has been taking place. And that is slowing down, opening the borders, but slowing down people entering into the country and even being open to other forms of therapeutics. There are other things that have been trialled overseas with success. The thing with the government here is that there's been a very narrow narrative, an echo chamber of a handful of experts, with many experts, even within New Zealand and internationally, in our community, within our universities. But there has been not only absolutely no attention to that, but really censorship of any form of debate. So, what do we stand for? Definitely freedom of speech and democracy. Healthcare that is restored more to a preventative approach rather than drugs and profits. We don't support abortion and are quite horrified with the abortion law that was passed in haste during lockdown, believing that there are 95% of New Zealanders that do not agree with that. I just want to say one thing about housing. There are 30,000 empty houses in New Zealand at this moment because of the immigrants pouring in, mainly owned by the Chinese. There is a housing shortage in this community, and I'm determined to do something about rectifying that, because I do believe that that will be on the increase as more and more people suffer through unemployment, through the subsidies that will not be being renewed shortly, and so it goes on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now the fun begins. Give me a microphone.
I've got one, thanks. Yeah. Okay, well, you have heard the opening presentations, and now it's your turn to ask a question. We have people with microphones. Really appreciate it if you put up your hand and wait for me to call you, and please wait for the microphone to come. And would you introduce yourself, say your name, and then could we please have questions rather than speeches? So who would like to ask a question this evening? Thank you.
Alana Blair.
Just speak, he'll bring it up.
Alana Blair. Sharon, you were just speaking. You didn't say what party you represented.
I'm sorry, Advance NZ. Sorry.
Thank you. That was your question. Okay. Here's a question, John.
Hi, my name's John Charlton. Could each of the candidates explain what they're going to do to help small businesses create jobs to overcome the unemployment which is rapidly approaching thanks to COVID?
Thank you. Do you want to start?
All right. Firstly, the New Conservatives have got a very, very good policy on business. We think this is something that dramatically has happened to the country, and we need to make some changes. What we are going to do, we're investing $10 billion into small businesses in New Zealand. We believe the most important thing that needs to happen in New Zealand is businesses need to get back to where they were. If they're back to where they were, it means they're employing people. If they're employing people, people are coming home with a pay packet every couple of weeks, rent's getting paid, mortgages are getting paid, families are eating and surviving and doing well. We also have some tax advantages too for that, and that is going to be the number one priority of the New Conservative Party, is getting businesses back on track, giving them whatever assistance they need in the terms of investment, in the terms of tax relief, and making sure this country gets back on its feet very, very quickly.
Thank you. Do you want to go?
Unfortunately, I believe that part of the lockdown process is a systematic way of actually crushing small business in this country at this time, as horrific as that sounds. So what we intend to do is basically be part of a government that actually has more say for the people and for businesses, rather than this sort of like steamrolling that's happening at the moment. I honestly don't believe it when I hear that there's new packages happening for businesses. I don't believe it, because I can see around me that businesses there isn't a lot of concern at the moment for businesses and what's happening for businesses, but it's more about some scary virus that has been used in some way to crush local business. My idea would be to actually have innovation groups, incubator hubs, to actually talk to the community and get ideas about what their requirements are. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't agree with you on everything, Sharon, but you're correct. There isn't a lot of concern for small businesses coming from this current government, or from the next 3 years if we look at it. National has been really clear on our plan for small businesses. Number one, businesses which are doing well at the moment, which there are some, which have had a bounce back in revenue, we're going to support you to hire more people by providing you with a $10,000 cash grant per new full-time employee you can bring in. Now what that means is it helps you offset training costs, offset costs of getting your new employees up to speed at a time where costs are high. For businesses which are struggling at the moment, we're going to allow depreciation of all new assets up to $150,000, meaning you can make a new investment, you can support yourselves, and you can get your company back up and rolling again. For businesses which are in need of a lot of help and have had to make people redundant, we are going to enable people who are out of a job to set up their own business, to set up their own company, and to get ahead. Because businesses that start off today as 1 or 2 person groups are tomorrow's 20 or 30 person medium-sized or large businesses. How will we do that? We will enable people to access $20,000 of their own KiwiSaver, allowing them to start up a business, a $1,000 cash grant that they're able to use to get financial advice, as well as ongoing financial assistance. The main reason that new businesses fail in this country is because they do not have financial advice to start with, and they do not have ongoing assistance, so we will give them the support they need. We're also going to provide New Zealanders with tax cuts, and the reason that's important is because it will stimulate our economy. What that means is that if you're a middle income earner, so you're the average person in New Zealand, you'll have an extra $3,000 in your pocket. And with interest rates being as low as they are at the moment, what we're seeing is increased spending, increased propensity to spend your money. So what will happen is you'll go and buy that extra cup of coffee, that extra pair of shoes, that new outfit you wanted, or go out for dinner once more a week. And so what that means is the flow-on effect for our economy is more people get to stay in a job, more people get support, and more people get to carry on with the employment that they have at the moment, rather than having to get made redundant and find a new job. The alternative vision is dire.
Thanks, William.
Thanks, William.
Oh, I'm just trying to be fair.
Trying to be pragmatic with the time.
You had 2 minutes.
Well, rather than pick holes in everybody else, I think we'll just sit back and see what this, the best way that we could look at completely sorting out not just small businesses but unemployment in general. The country is going through a massive crisis. We know the economic downturn is here, and we know things are going to move forward. The changes that are occurring, we were not prepared for, in the sense that we didn't know that COVID-19 was coming, but we knew that we had to rebuild after a lot of the changes that occurred from the past. One of the big things is getting the domestic economy cranked up and running again. A combination of tech hubs, banking stimulus, background, trade training, moving unemployed people, some unemployed people who would be suitable into other sorts of jobs, getting the industry, for example, Hawke's Bay is a classic. We need to look at you moving unemployed people into those areas there to do the harvest for the seasonal harvest coming, moving people around the country as necessary for infrastructure. The amount of jobs that are going to come with the hub here and the ongoing infrastructure projects here are going to be huge. Palmerston North is a up-and-coming province. We were always there, and we'll always be there again. The main concern that I have is actually also understanding not just our domestic economy, but also our international economy. We still need our farms. We still need producing our food. We also need to look into innovation around us. For example, we've got how many thousand cubic metres of wood sitting up in Gisborne at the moment? Why aren't we manufacturing all sorts of goods out of that wood? Why send them to offshore to other countries? We can't do that at the moment. We need to move away from our tourist-based industry that was international, start looking at our tourist-based industry that was internal and domestic. We need to maintain our farms, maintain our tech industries, look at our unemployment in the future, stimulate the economy with small businesses, and assist each other to move forward. The big thing that we're all going to have to do is innovate. Thank you. Party vote, New Zealand first.
Well, look, the first thing is the answer is not in tax cuts. Actually, the proposed tax cuts in terms of support for the economy, someone who's on the minimum wage will get an extra $8 in their back pocket a week. Now, they're the very people who are going to stimulate the economy in terms of spending. So the ones who are going to win out from any proposed tax cuts is obviously those that are not actually going to be spending it in the economy. What I would say is that Labor has a track record. 1.7 million people are still in employment because of the decision to roll out the wage subsidy. 1.7 million people. I accept at a cost, obviously. So we have a track record in that space. Not only that, we have announced in terms of cash flow opportunities, there will be opportunities for loans for those in terms of interest-free loans for small businesses and others that need some assistance. We will also look to remove merchant fees for small businesses. Now, you might not think that that's a lot on one transaction or two transactions, but the cumulative impact is huge for small businesses. That will make a real difference. Along with that, obviously working to support small businesses in the digital space, because that is a way in which, regardless of the climate or the environment, businesses can get ahead. So what I would say is Labor has a proven track record in terms of the initiatives that it has unveiled as part of a difficult time, and that we're not intending to just stop there.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Support that idea about tax cuts as well, because if you cut taxes, then something in essential services gets cut as well. If we flash back to the COVID emergency when it kicked in, we didn't have enough ventilators in this country, which is why the response rolled out like the way that it did, because our hospitals wouldn't be able to handle it. So when I hear tax cuts, I know that what that means. I look to see where the cuts will be made in central services, so I'm against that. In terms of sustainable businesses, we know that after the COVID crisis, we've got the climate crisis, so we've got an opportunity to actually reset the economy and reset it in mind with the other issues that are coming on down the track. We have a really specific profile here in Palmerston North in terms of tourism. Most like cities like Queenstown and Rotorua, most of their tourism comes internationally, but most of our tourists are domestic as well. And so what that means is that people come here to visit you and I, and they want to stay for a couple of days. So our role here as people that are interested in supporting businesses here in Palmerston North is to make sure that they stay longer and spend more money. And one of the reasons why they come here is that they like to check out the gorge, or they like to check out the nature and so on and so forth. So it's really important that what we do in terms of the environment and supporting biodiversity and all those kind of things actually has a flow-on effect for businesses. One of the things that we want to bring back and revitalise is Buy Kiwi Made, making sure that people buy local and know that they are buying local, and buying local means that that's money in businesses' pockets here in Palmerston North as well. We also want to set up programs to build leadership amongst businesses, to get them to think about sustainable businesses as a pathway for their business. We only have to look on top of the hill to see the windmills to know that clean energy is the energy of the future as well. So we are looking at different ways to create career pathways for people that can step into clean energy, so solar panels, wind energy, all that kind of stuff, working with trade unions, working with the industry, and making sure that those things happen.
Thank you, Tiano. Thank you. Yep.
Was that the bell? Thank you. Anyway, party vote green.
Thank you. We have a question down here. John, in front of you.
What would each of your parties do in response to climate change?
Let's go the other way. Would you like to, you feel happy to kick off?
Sure. We're the Greens, so we're into doing stuff on climate change. Everything in our policy platform for this election has a climate lens over it. So we're campaigning on fairer communities, clean economy, and all of that sort of stuff. So last week we released our Farming for the Future policy platform, and that was about supporting farmers to transition from intensive farming to regenerative agriculture, because that's some way that kind of agricultural practice helps us to actually be more in tune with the ecosystem and be more in tune with the environment. Our clean energy plan was about giving us a plan to actually move to sustainable energy. We've got the windmills on the hill. It reminds us every day that that is the way that we should be moving and transitioning towards. And so in that space, what we want to do is, as a kickstart, to transition all of our public housing homes to solar energy. So there's around about 60,000 of that. That would help to generate business support for solar energy companies as well. So from that perspective, it's like, well, that's one lever there in terms of clean energy, but also another way looking at it with the climate change stuff. What we have done is pass the Zero Carbon Act, and it was actually with the support of all the parties here as well, and so National supported that as well. And so what that gives us is actually this first step to actually set the parameters on how we will step into the future as well. So, and there's a whole lot of other stuff.
Thank you.
So I guess in terms of the starting point, and Tiana has touched on this, the Zero Carbon Act is something that obviously, yes, we were supportive of, and I would hope that that would be an indication of a starting point or a base. You would have heard that Labor has announced a target around 100% renewable energy, and the fact that that is deliverable. There is some criticism, I know, from some around the cost around that. We're confident that actually as the opportunity unveils itself, that won't be a prohibitive factor. You would have heard us talk about movement in the EV space in terms of infrastructure and wanting to roll out a bit better in that sense. And obviously the work around job growth and opportunities around waterways as well. So it's an important issue, and Labor is looking to play its role in terms of moving forward around that.
Thank you.
I support my colleagues in Parliament and all through New Zealand with the extensive awareness of climate change and how it's going to affect us in the future. New Zealand First is behind huge amounts of these various bills and comments that my coalition partners here have actually said, including the Zero Carbon Emission Commission. I also like to know that past the landmark climate change zero carbon amendment bill as part of the coalition, as we've discussed, supported the Independent Climate Commission. We also banned single-use plastic bags and microbeads, gave Department of Conservation the largest funding boost in 16 years, and a variety of other things, cleaning up our rivers, invested record amounts in cleaner public transport, committed to planting 1 billion trees through the 1 billion trees program. It's going to make a big difference as much as we can. Started work towards greater product stewardship, ending life of tyres, etc., and increasing New Zealand's biosecurity budget. One of the most interesting things is that New Zealand Defence Force is heavily involved, believe it or not, in climate change. For example, if you need to know what's happening down in Antarctica, how do you think the vast majority of our scientists get down there and actually learn about this? Protecting the Pacific in the long run, especially with disaster relief and the rising seas, we're going to be the ones in the front line. New Zealand's role is going to be quite extensive in the Pacific, and we've had to invest in not just looking at the zero carbon, but what is these in the future, how it's going to affect our coastlines, our Pacific neighbours, and also our closest other largest neighbour, Australia. So New Zealand First is right behind us. Thank you.
Thank you.
National takes a pretty clear, pragmatic approach to dealing with climate change and environmental damage. Policies put forward by this government, such as banning oil and gas drilling, sound great on the surface, sound like we're making a difference. The reality is our coal imports in this country in the past 3 years have gone up by 112% because our natural gas production of electricity has gone down due to the fact we've stopped mining for it. So what National said is we're going to reopen oil and gas drilling to have a tangible, real impact on transitioning away from oil and towards natural gas as a transitional fuel. I've talked to multiple companies, including some here in town, which have said that they are not going to upgrade to a gas or electrical kiln or furnace to dry their milk powder and to dry their wood chips because they do not have confidence that this government is going to be able to provide them with the natural gas they need to transition away from coal, so they're keeping their coal burners. And that's the reality and the uncertainty caused by a Green Labour coalition. As for agriculture, one of the policies that's been a hallmark of this government has been attempting to cut agriculture's emissions in half. And National signed up to the Paris Accord, yes we did, but there was a caveat in there saying that climate change or handling climate change cannot be done in a way which impacts food production. Our farmers produce food for almost 30 million people. Now, if we cut that in half to 15 million, there are still going to be 15 million other people who need to eat. And given we are the most environmentally efficient producers of food in the entire world, that 15 million is going to have to come from somewhere, and if that somewhere's not New Zealand, that somewhere's going to be worse for the environment. So what National said is we'll look at genetically engineered grasses, which reduce methane emissions, absolutely. We'll look at programs which pragmatically deal with environmental emissions. But we are not going to focus on getting nice headlines. We're not going to focus on paying lip service to the issues. We're going to focus on actually dealing with them. We've released a policy recently on electric vehicles. 103 have been delivered by this current government. We would deliver up to 3,000. As for 100% renewable electricity, the Labour and Green Party's own government have told them in a report that that will increase electricity costs for everyday New Zealanders by up to 30%. And that is not a cost when we are already leading the world in renewable energy production that New Zealand needs to take. We are already doing well, and we need to play and continue to push on our merits, not hold us back on aspirational targets that won't make a tangible difference. So National's clear. Be sensible and be pragmatic.
I'm really pleased to hear the narrative change from global warming to climate change, because things change. And one of the things I trust more than anything about Kiwis is Kiwi ingenuity. And one of the things I would love to see more in this town is for this to be known as an innovation and an incubation hub for great ideas. I think we missed the opportunity some years ago to become actually what we profess to be, and that is clean, green New Zealand. We're not so clean, we're not so green. So what I would like to see, and what we will be encouraging, is actually the innovation and incubation from the ideas of the people. And that will include boutique industries. That will include bringing in experts, bringing in youth from outside of town to come and discuss the hot issues, to actually, from within the community, from within our youth, and the experience that comes with age, to actually come up with ideas about the ways that we can adapt to changing times. And there are changing times around for all of us, not just in climate, in our businesses, and what's happening for us socially, economically, politically. Thank you.
The New Conservatives are probably slightly different to everybody else insofar as we're more pragmatic. We spend billions of dollars with the Kyoto Protocol, spending billions of dollars to the UN in the hunt for getting under this 1% of carbon credits. We don't want that. We would rather keep the money in New Zealand. We have full confidence in our scientists and our farmers in this country to be able to do what we need to do ourselves. No point in sending billions of dollars to the UN. For what return? For what reason? We can do it here. Our farmers, we've heard tonight, are the best in the world. I totally believe that. They don't want to mess up their properties. That's their investment. That's their livelihood. We are going to go and continue petroleum exploration. If we can become a petroleum exporting country, so much the better, provided we can do it safely. We will go mining, provided we would do it safely. We would do coal, providing we did it safely. We're in the financial doo-doo, quite frankly, now. We need to earn money to get this country back on an even keel. I really don't see the point in sitting in the square watching the windmills on the ranges when you're slowly starving to death.
Thank you. Questions? Up the back. Brian, could you take a mic?
My question is to William. I'm a bit concerned about your spokesman for finance. He doesn't seem to be able to add up. And it concerns me that there's a couple of a $4.8 billion deficit, plus another 3.9, plus 800,000. So my question is, with all your comments about infrastructure, will you guarantee that they will actually be funded? Because the last national government did not fund the roads of national importance.
So thank you for the question, Trevor, and it's a good question, it's an important question. What's happened over the past few weeks has highlighted a pretty stark difference between the National Party and the Labour Party. When National makes a mistake, when National mucks up, we admit it, we hold our head up high, and we fix it. Within an hour, the hole had been plugged, and we had adjusted our plan to change our debt target from 35% to 36%, 226 million a year. What was that?
He's made 2 other errors since then, which he hasn't apologised for.
One of the errors is a difference in labelling, so it is all allocated for, the other 3.9 that you talk about, so that is in the plan. And as for the other one, that's being managed. The question around infrastructure, though, is an important one, because we have announced quite a few infrastructure projects, and not just roads, though some people would like to make you believe that, projects around developing rail, around developing cycling opportunities and pedestrians, but also quite a few roads, because as our city ticked over, or as our country ticked over, to 5 million people in it, we have an ageing infrastructure program. The difference between our team now and our team 9 years ago is we are in a very different position as a country. We have a $20 billion COVID response fund. We have an opportunity where we are not having to rebuild a city, where we are not having to deal with the 2008 financial crisis. National has a team of people with Chris Bishop at the helm of our transport program that have been costed, that have been approved by the New Zealand Economic Institute and shown that they can take place without cuts to essential services like the Greens would like to make you think, but in a way which allows us to pay back our debt and a way which allows us to invest in our country's future. What National has said is that, no, we cannot get back to quite the debt level we were at before COVID-19. That's not going to be realistic. We are not arguing for austerity. We are going to have to spend money to get out of this crisis. But I would rather money's being spent on viable investments that actually work for our community rather than what's going on at the moment. When I hear from our Wairarapa candidate that there's an aerodrome down in Wairarapa which applied for $3 million of funding from the COVID response fund, and they got told by this current government, take $10 million, spend it where you can, get it out the door, that upsets me. There is an idea that came into being that our policies should be judged by the price tag attached to them rather than by the quality which they bring to their community. And I don't think that's right. So I'm going to support projects which are big and small, which work, and National will deliver.
Up the back, John, could you take a microphone?
Kia ora, I'm Amira. First of all, I'd like to say it's Wairarapa, and it is Rangatiki. So, sorry, I just thought I'd make that clear. We are on Māori land. Even though I am not Māori, it is respectful to do so. And to say words correctly, it is not that difficult. Second of all, what do you classify as being a New Zealander? Because I've heard several different variations of what you believe it to be, but what would you classify as? Going back to Kiwi ingenuity, going back to the roots of New Zealand, because could be very different for a lot of people.
Yep. So you would like can I just clarify? You'd like each candidate to comment on what they understand a New Zealander is.
What would you classify as going back to the roots of New Zealand? What New Zealand stands for? What is a Kiwi? What does that mean to you?
All right. You want to go?
Tēnā koe, thank you for the question. I think one of the great things about New Zealand is that we are a multicultural community, but we have very strong bicultural heritage in the sense of acknowledging that the people of the land have a special place in New Zealand. And so what my party is doing work in that particular space is around Māori Crown relations and making sure that we have a respectful relationship moving forward. Having said that, I think it goes back to also the fact that while that's the basis of our founding and us as a nation, actually we're able to celebrate the multicultural dimension that is so special to us. And just here in Palmerston North, you know, I think 138, 139 different ethnic groups that are represented here in Palmerston North. And so what Labor is keen to do is to continue to roll out the Welcoming Communities Initiative. That's something that has been around for a wee while in certain pilot areas, and it makes certain, and I guess a continued opportunity, that those locations and cities are a particularly welcoming place given the huge diversity that is on offer. So fundamentally a bicultural basis, but celebrating the fact that we are a multicultural community. That to me is the essence of being a Kiwi or a New Zealander.
Thank you. Others want to comment? Yep, you go.
Firstly, I agree with what you've said about the biculturalism, biculturalism and we're really a mixed group. But I want to come at this in a little bit of a different way. We've been sold at the moment this idea of the new Kiwi normal. One of the things that we are as Kiwis is we're freedom-loving people. And there are certain Kiwi cultures, Kiwiana, that we actually hold dear and actually have become part of our traditions. I feel that at this time, that's under threat. There seems to be a narrative around that is actually asking us to buy into this idea of a new normal. The thing that I say more than anything is this isn't normal to me what's happening. If it's mask wearing or tracking or facial recognitions or the eroding of our rights, the Bill of Rights has been eroded seriously recently. The COVID health bill, Section 11, has really given the government inordinate powers. And of course, I'm hoping, like we all do, that that gets rolled back when the COVID crisis is over. I'm talking about what I consider Kiwi and what is actually taking place at this point in time. I think we've been sold a new kind of normal that I don't consider the Kiwi that I know and love. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'll be very brief. I agree with some of what's been said tonight. As far as a New Zealander is concerned, to me, a New Zealander is a person who has chosen, with free will, to make New Zealand their home. It doesn't matter from whence they came. We are literally all immigrants from somewhere, but it doesn't matter where you come from. If you decide to make New Zealand home and you follow the rules, the laws of New Zealand, and you undertake the lifestyle of New Zealand, still maintaining your own, of course, but you still respect and take hold of what I call the general lifestyle. I've got a lot of involvement with a lot of different nationalities, and particularly the Filipino community, and I often used to say to a lot of mums, Filipino mums, the day that we get a Filipino halfback in the All Blacks is the day I think we've finally come together as races. And they all say, no, rugby's too dangerous, so can't do that. But we have a lot of fun about that. But if you come to New Zealand, whether you're an Indian immigrant, you're from Afghanistan, from the Philippines, wherever you come from, if you latch on to New Zealand and you commit to New Zealand as your home, you follow the law, at the same time having your own cultures, but you still follow the overall laws and lifestyle of New Zealand to me, and you become a citizen, you are a New Zealander.
Respect, tolerance, understanding and love of each other, not to be too cheesy, is what I think it means to be a New Zealander. Often stories happen for a reason. I was just at our local multicultural council today talking to an incredible lady, Christine, who runs that organisation there. And she said to me, William, I've travelled the world. I've been to all sorts of different countries where I felt ashamed to wear my historic dress. I felt ashamed to eat the food that I love or the food of my culture. She said, I came to Palmerston North and I didn't feel ashamed. People treated me with respect. They treated me with fairness. They treated me with kindness. And I think that's a lot about what it means to be a New Zealander. If you want to come to our country, if you want to work hard, we will back you, we will support you, and we will get in behind you. And I'm so proud to be a part of a generation working alongside so many people from across our community who believe that no matter who you are, no matter where you are from, you deserve a place in our country, you deserve a place in our society, and if you're going to work hard, we are going to support you to do it. So I think what it means to be a New Zealander, I think it means to be someone who loves our country, someone who chose to be here or is here because they want to be, and someone who has got the support of the community and backing of the community. And that's what I personally am going to work towards as your MP, if elected in October, because we all deserve to be treated with fairness and kindness, no matter who we are.
Kia ora everyone. Pretty much agree with everything that everyone else has said, except for Sharon. I didn't understand a word of that, to be honest. So the Greens, one of the things that threads together our core principle is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, so recognising that Māori are tangata whenua here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And one of the things I think that can really build understanding is actually getting local history into the curriculum in our schools. Like when I went to school, we learnt about the King of England and the Queen of England and all this stuff over in England overseas, but we didn't actually learn about the history on the places where we were standing, where our schools were and where our communities are. So the Greens are really committed to making sure that we bring that history alive, so that when people do come over from overseas and they do call Aotearoa New Zealand home, they actually get to learn about what the actual history of the place is. Another one of our policies is actually understanding. Yes, New Zealand, we are in this corner of the world, but we're in the Pacific as well. So Pacific history is actually really, really useful and really interesting as well. So making sure that that we understand the history of Aotearoa New Zealand in the context of the Pacific, and making sure that comes to life in our schools and our kura. I think those sorts of things will be the things that actually really bring our people together. Kia ora.
Being a Kiwi, for me, is something that I see as very unique. Being a New Zealander is something very, very special. I believe a lot of what my colleagues have said here, I also am in agreement with. The basis of our biculturalism, the basis of our multiculturalism, and the awareness that all of us, regardless of our ethnicity, one originally came from somewhere. This unique set of values, though, that we have is a Kiwi is a unique bird. It isn't anywhere else except in this country. And we have a unique set of values here. The respect, the belief, the ideas. It's a bit of, she'll be right, mate. Give someone a fair go. Look after each other. Be kind, to coin a phrase. To understand that we are all family, and to respect our background and where we're at, and that we can do it together. We don't mind. We don't mind if we're gender blind, colour blind, religion blind, race blind. We love you all. Just party vote New Zealand first.
Thank you. Rob? Brian has a microphone.
I'd like to ask the National and Labour representatives what they're going to do with the colossal debt that faces New Zealand.
Prior to COVID, in terms of the debt, Labor had managed to get down less than 20% of GDP. And there's no doubt that debt moving forward, I think you won't find any disagreement amongst the two major Labor and National, in terms of the requirement for debt. The more important thing, I think, is what the debt is going to be used for. And as I've said at the start, Labor has a 5-point plan. It is an economic recovery plan. It does mean that some aspects of the plan will require borrowing in order to be able to deliver on those 5 requirements, but that's just the reality of the circumstances that we're in at the moment. So in terms of future forward planning focus, I'm suggesting that Labor has not just the leadership, but a plan to get us through this current environment, current time, and that's where the money in terms of the borrowing will be directed, which is quite different from other political parties.
There's 2 ways you can pay down debt. One is through taxes, the other is through growing the economy. And National's been really clear, the best way that we can pay down debt as a country is by growing the economy to grow tax revenue to enable us to pay that back. And we've put together a fully costed plan that will have us down to a debt at 36% of GDP by 2027/2028. Now, Tangi's right to a degree. What the key question is in the debt that we've got at the moment is the quality of the spending and the way that it's being spent. And not only are there issues, in my view and in the National Party's view, with some of the spending going on at the moment, as I highlighted earlier, it's about looking forward as a country where we are going to go. Now, we've said we're going to invest in legacy infrastructure. The pipeline of projects that Labor talks about are projects that they cancelled in 2017, that we would get back up and running again and that we would get moving, whether that's 4 lanes to live in, whether that's the Palmerston North Ring Road, whether that's a second Auckland Harbour Bridge. Because in our country, we cannot measure our debt by the number attached, or we cannot measure a project by the number attached to it. I talk to our local disability support services who say to me, $10,000 to fix the pavement or fix the sidewalk would make a huge impact for their people. It doesn't come with a lot of debt, it doesn't come with a nice figure that can be bandied around, but it's an important, meaningful project. So what I'm going to do, and what National is going to do with your debt, or with the debt that we are incurring, is we're going to spend it on quality projects. One is infrastructure, yes, the other is housing. What has happened in our country over multiple governments is state housing has not been built. So Yep. So 3,000 houses were built under John Key, 2,000 were built under Helen Clark, and I am a fresh approach and I bring a new view to national. Because we cannot only pull one lever of community housing or of kia order housing. What we need to be doing is pulling every lever we have available to us. One of that is getting kia order housing built. The second is the fact that I don't know how to build a house, Tangi doesn't know how to build a house, and most people in the ministry don't know how to build a house. So let's back people in our community, like Te Tihi, like Homes for People, like the Papaoia Place Development. Let's back people who've got the experience and knowledge of our community to build housing, rather than simply saying that government needs to just do it ourselves.
Thank you.
So that's how we're going to deal with debt, good quality spending.
Yeah.
Now I apologise to jump in here and gate crash, but and I know that the gentleman didn't ask New Zealand First's opinion, but I'm actually going to jump up here anyway. Maybe, William, you actually need to go and do some trade training if you don't know how to swing a hammer. That's all right, though. Some of us out here I got a little bit of grey hair around my edge here, I probably remember how to swing a hammer. But he's right, I'm not a builder. We actually have to find those skills amongst ourselves and start the training, which we have done. In relation to debt, don't be afraid of debt. One of the problems is that everyone is so shy of debt. It's like we actually have to spend some money to get out of the looming economic recession that we're in and to actually move forward as a country. People seem to forget that our export earnings are incredibly high. As you say, we produce so much food and we still will continue. And all of our export and expert technical expertise that we're going to manufacture in this country, keep moving innovative. We can pay down this debt. We also are at a far better position than most of the other countries in the Western world. And if we have a GDP ratio of 43 to 48%, that's actually nothing in comparison to, say, the UK, which is probably about 100%. We have the ability to pay down the debt. It may take a little while. We're not going to strangle our young, even though William is concerned that we will. I'm sure that we can work our way out of this very, very quickly. It will take a bit of time, but it won't be austerity. We have a massive export base. We'll go forward. Thank you.
Sorry, since we're all cash, I might as well jump in there as well. Our thing is that we've got to think ahead about all the other issues that are coming down the track. Climate change is coming down the track. Biodiversity crisis is coming down the track. Why deal with one crisis when we can deal with all of them by thinking ahead and actually organising ourselves so that when we plan for actually infrastructure or for jobs, that those jobs are green. They are jobs that make sure that we are bringing down our emissions. And just one point about the movement from coal to methane. Methane has a shorter half-life. So in terms of like transitioning, we can't use methane within the first 10, 20 years because yes, it stays up in the atmosphere for a short amount of time, but it's more intense. So you can't use it within this time frame if we're going to meet our our emissions targets as well. So science is our friends, people. Party vote green.
Just very, very briefly, it's interesting the fear that we have with debt. Now, I know that we're going to be looking at something like $160 billion worth of debt. But those of you that bought your first house, say back in the 70s, you had a $50,000 mortgage from the bank. And you got home and you sat on the carpet when you first took the keys over and thought, oh my God, what have I done? I owe $50,000. I've never owed that much money in my entire life. I'm quite happy to buy your house for your mortgage then, today, if you would allow me to do so. I think what we need to do is come up with new ways and interesting ways to do it. We've heard all sorts of ways that the various parties are going to do it, but in a nutshell, we need to get people working. We need businesses going. We need, we need proper taxation. We need, for example, the New Conservative Party is giving you the first $20,000 tax-free. That's your money. You know what to do with it better than any government knows what to do with it. That's going to be a big advantage, $20,000. If you and your wife are earning different amounts of money, we can combine them. Income splitting, it's called. It's in the brochures. Look on the website, read how that works, so your tax is going to come down. We have a debt, a mountain of debt. We've just got to get new and different ways to handle that debt without freaking out about it. We're in the situation, we're in the doo-doos. We've got to get out of it. We've got to do it with good planning, wise investment, and wise spending.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing up the subject of debt, and of course we should all be concerned about how much debt is being incurred during this COVID crisis. I want to say that as a voter, I'm going to reveal who I voted for in the past, and it's actually been New Zealand First. One of the reasons I voted for New Zealand First was purely for them to be a sort of like a watchdog in government. I was aware that there was two main parties. One of the things that Winston Peter has said, in fact, I'll back up a little. A couple of weeks ago, he was in Sanson on his party tour. I just about jumped out of a moving vehicle and went up to him and said, Winston, what happened to you? Were you gagged? Where has been your voice? One of the things that I've heard recently, a few weeks ago, was Winston Peters on News Hub saying that both National and Labour are both taking money, Chinese money. My question about debt is a little bit of a different one. It is, where is the money coming from that we are borrowing? What are the conditions of the debt? I have those kind of questions. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question down here, John, please.
Thank you. My name is Jason. In 2017, in the central region, which Palmerston North is part of, there were 345 people on the social housing register. Jacinda Ardern and Ian Lees Galloway stood in Farnham Park in Highbury and promised 149 Kiwi-built homes. Ian Lees Galloway put a video out on Facebook saying, "You need to vote Labour so I can get you the homes that Palmerston North needs."
Could you ask a question, please?
3 years later, 0 Kiwi-built homes have been built. There are now 1,074 people on that register waiting for a home. The question is, what will your party do, policy-wise, to get those 1,074 people who are waiting right now, hundreds in motels, into homes?
Yep. Would you like to start, Tiano, please?
So we released our Homes for All package, and so what we want to do is encourage a not-for-profit sector housing, and also putting in more protections in there for renters as well, because what we know is that the growing population of tenants is becoming more and more. I think we're heading towards around about 50% mark, so that's really important. We also want to support Māori to build papakainga and use that as an option to actually put some housing options there for their whānau as well, and also supporting lots of all the other sort of housing providers out there as well. Yes, and so we would like to also expand the Kāinga Ora Crown Building Program to deliver enough new affordable rental homes to clear the public housing waiting list in 5 years and expand progressive home ownership options like rent-to-own. So our co-leader, Marama Davidson, was one of the people that was fundamental in getting the Progressive Home Ownership Fund together to help people to step into that if that's what's good for them. We also want to end homelessness by building on support programs that already work. We also want to put communities at the heart of development by fixing funding and regulatory barriers to papakainga housing and making co-housing easier for first home buyers. We want to create a fairer deal for people who rent by, increasing the supply of affordable rentals using a Crown underwrite, reviewing financial assistance for renters, improving the health home standards and the warrant of fitness for rental homes, and fairer rules for landlords, property managers and student accommodation. So that last bit where we were talking about, well, what are we going to do with this money that we're borrowing? I think we should be putting it here. Housing is a big issue. We also want to plan for thriving green neighbourhoods with inclusive housing outcomes, and also improve the quality housing by overhauling the building code and expanding subsidies for energy efficiency retrofitting.
Thank you for the question. I think it was largely around public and social housing, so I'll stick to that. But essentially, what I would say is that the first state house, public social house, has been built by this government in this city for the first time in 25 years. First time in 25 years, this government has delivered a state house in Palmerston North. Prior to that, No action, no movement, no development. 25 years. That's how long it had taken. In terms of moving forward, Labor has announced that it will, by 2024, have over 18,000 public and social houses that would have been built. That's what we're on track. And I take the point around Kiwi Build. We've been upfront around that, but we're focused on moving forward. In terms of partnership opportunities, moving forward as well, the announcement of $4.7 million into Papaioia Public House here, which is in partnership with the council, that's a form of investment. So what I would say is that while Kiwi Build perhaps hasn't delivered to the extent that it could have, the fact is Labor has delivered social housing for this very city and its community.
Social housing is a complex issue. It's never just one thing, is it? Unfortunately here, in the Manawatu and in Palmerston North, if I remember correctly, there was a previous government that knocked most of the state houses down. So it took a while for us to actually catch up. Unfortunately, yes, as our Labor colleague here has just said, it has taken a while, but the first house in 25 years has been built here. The reality is that also all the people who are now on that housing register looking for new houses, a lot of them had disappeared into the woodwork before. And we actually sought them out and wanted to know who needed a house. We wanted to take the 40,000 homeless that had ended up on the streets throughout the whole country, not just in Palmerston North, but everywhere, and find out where they were. We had to put them somewhere because unfortunately, as I say again, there wasn't anywhere to put them because a lot of those places were knocked down. We're in process of building. It takes time. We have invested as much as we can in infrastructure. One of the other things is that there's a hell of a lot of wood out here, and we can actually use that to build houses. Buy New Zealand made, we're looking at innovations, how we can move that forward, invest in our tech, invest in our houses, more trade training, party vote New Zealand first.
One thing I'd like to address, Anthony, just to put your mind at ease, is I grew up on a farm and I've been swinging a hammer since I could remember. In fact, my team can attest I've been sledgehammering poles into the ground to put up signs for the past few months, as we all have been. Community housing is a passion of mine, and it's part of the reason I put myself forward. In fact, if I wasn't here doing what I was doing today, I would probably be working with some of our community housing groups, helping out on how we can better get housing built for our city. Some of these horrible sales of social housing land, the villainous National Party, was sold to groups like Te Tihi, an offset of some of our community housing providers here in town. Groups like Homes for People, which just this year put 16 homes on land that had far less on it originally. So what now I believe in and what National believes in is partnership with our communities and partnership with our regions and with our urban areas. We approach housing in three ways. One is about supporting our public housing providers, so Ki Anga Ora, to build. And absolutely, we should be building housing, and that is good to see that we are. The second way we need to support our housing sector is by engaging with our community housing providers who've got the know-how of our city to do it. And whether that be by providing them with the land and resource they need, or whether that be by providing them the seeding capital they need to develop houses and get them built. We have some incredible organisations here in town which are starting to get off the ground thanks to some of the investment that came in 2017 and 2016. The other way we do it is by unlocking private development. And I talked to a developer just last month who said to me, William, I've got a couple acres out in Ashurst, and I had two choices. One, I could build 10 three-bedroom affordable homes, and it would take me 3 or 4 years of consenting to get that done. Or I could build five-bedroom luxury homes. It would only take me 1 or 2 years to get the consent through, and I'd make about the same amount of money either way. So we said the legislation we've got at the moment in the Resource Management Act is telling developers that you should build less, more expensive homes rather than more, less expensive homes. And I don't think any party here wants to have a development system that's hamstrung by a non-fit-for-purpose RMA. So the first thing we're going to do is scrap it and replace it with an Environmental Standards and Building Regulation Standards Act, which will streamline the process and get housing built, as well as unlocking some of government's potential to build with the failings we've seen in Kiwi Build that was hamstrung by the Resource Management Act, but also enabling our community housing providers to build.
Yes, this is a complex issue, and it's one that's going to become increasingly more important. I don't think either of the main parties could really, in any way, shape or form, be proud of the effort over recent times. The current government is spending $600 million every few weeks on temporary housing, and that has really been amped up through this COVID time. Some of those people that have been provided with temporary housing will soon have already started to be thrown out. In wandering around and being in this community, and I just want to remind everybody that Advance NZ is a people's party. So I have been going around the community listening to what the people have to say. And I'm very concerned on the housing issue. And I just want to note there are people within the community that are helping each other in this one. There are people that don't have much that are actually going around to the various scrap yards and building yards asking for offcuts and things that are in their dumpsters to actually build accommodation for their whānau. That's really happening. I picked up somebody actually hitchhiking the other day. I didn't mean to, but I was stopped and they knocked on my window. This is somebody who goes around the whole of New Zealand looking out for homeless people and helping them go to WINS and find the best way to gain access to the various benefits and housing, some form of emergency accommodation if it's available. In terms of wood, local wood, it is a lot cheaper in many respects to bring wood in from Australia that has actually been grown here in New Zealand, because there's something about the red tape and I don't know, there's a lot of nonsense is all I can say. Red tape is something that definitely needs to go. I was very pleased to hear recently that you can actually now build some form of temporary dwelling that's gone from 10 square metres to 30 square metres without a hell of a lot of red tape.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Conservative is well aware that this country does not have enough houses. It's that simple. How do we fix the problem? We get off our BTMs and we do something about it. The Resource Management Act, we believe, needs to be kicked into the curb. We have situations where a huge part of the cost of a home is in council fees. We believe once a design and a house has been approved, once, that's all it needs. That same house design can be approved for multiple locations. We have several like that, and we have a choice. And it's only gone through the RMA once, but the RMA has got to go. We believe in looking at some of the best available building timbers or methods that have been used in first world countries around the world. And some of the buildings, the timber, for example, some of the claddings, if they're fit for purpose, bring them in. If we can't provide our own, bring them in if they're going to be cheaper. We believe in working out with councils, joint ventures. We believe in working out different houses, like rent to own, rent to buy. We believe in looking at some of the houses we have, for example, in Palmerston North, that are habited by an elderly person, maybe two people there, and they find the house is getting a bit big for them. We've got to find ways to get them to a nice, modern house that they're going to be very happy with. They're going to be warm, and they can look after very, very adequately, freeing up a house that maybe can be used by a family. We've just got to be thinking outside of the box, if you're pardon the expression, outside of the square, and we've got to fix the housing problem. That's a number one priority for New Conservative.
Thank you. Can I say I'm aiming to finish at 9:10, so we have quarter of an hour left. There will be an opportunity for a cup of tea if you want to share in that and to speak with the candidates afterwards. So I'm aiming for another 15 minutes. Up the back there, thank you, John. John, up the back.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'd like to ask where each of you stand on the binding End-of-Life Choice Act referendum.
Yeah. Choice, yeah. Right.
Look on.
Yep, you go first. I think So the question, as I understand it, was what is your personal position on the End of Life Choice Act?
Look, I'm not a hardliner either way on this position. My family, we own a rest home here in town, Cook Street Nursing Care Centre. I've been around palliative and aged care my entire life, so it's something I've got a close personal connection to. The End of Life Choice Act has one stated goal, which is to decrease suffering at the end of life. And when I talked to a palliative care doctor the other day, I asked him, how many people can you stop suffering for before they pass away? So how many people can you manage the pain for? And he said to me, probably around 95%, William, with maybe 5% which die in a small amount of pain with enough morphine. Part of the problem with the way that we look at the End of Choice Act is suffering also often is not on behalf of the individual, it's on behalf of the family. It's horrible to watch a loved one die, it's horrible to watch a loved one pass away, we've all gone through it. But fundamentally, when most of the elder abuse in our community comes from the family, when there are not many checks and balances in there to ascertain whether that individual's been coerced into euthanasia, I personally think it's the wrong path to go down. I think when we change our palliative care discussion from how do we preserve quality of life for as long as possible to at what point do we put this person down, I think it harms the way in which we approach end-of-life care. So in my personal view, I'll be voting against, but I understand the arguments for and I fully empathise with those of you who are going to vote in favour, but I'll be voting no.
You want to go?
Thank you, William. Definitely not enough checks and balances from all the research on this Act. It seems to be going hand in hand and too easily available. It seems to be going hand in hand with the other end of the scale with this government, that also abortions are very readily, no questions asked, available right up to full term. So there's something about both ends of the scale here that I just don't like the way that this is moving at all. I feel that, it's part of, that's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll jump in on that note. The New Conservative is pro-life, so obviously we don't like the legislation as it stands. We find it very flawed. And William, I too spoke to a palliative care doctor 4 days ago, and I asked him exactly the same question you did. His answer was almost 100%. We don't believe that we need legislation in New Zealand to hasten the demise of somebody at the very end of their days. We believe that, I don't know, maybe call it something else will hasten that and do that work. But most of the doctors in New Zealand, I believe over 1,000 doctors in New Zealand, have signed a pledge to say they will not administer any lethal dose to any patient in New Zealand. And I think, thank God for the doctors that have come out like that. We think it's flawed legislation. New Conservative are against it. I certainly will be voting no, and I ask you please to read the legislation, understand it before you make your final decision on election day.
What a strange note. I find myself agreeing with William Wood tonight. We supported it right through all the three readings as well. And I think that was the right place to take that. And I also think it was the right place to actually take it out to the referendum. However, I have been going out and talking to different health advocates in the community, and I am veering on the no. And one of the things that they did highlight to me was the inequality already inherent within the health system, which could actually act as a deterrent and put pressure on people to actually take this path. But I also understand that the suffering of the individual and the family as well. So for me, I'm not a hardliner on this one as well, but I am tipping that way.
I guess what I'd say is I have come full circle and then done some as well, perhaps, because I am a supporter. My personal view is around euthanasia, However, when challenged to look at the specifics of this bill and the process, I am left with some doubt around that, and there are two reasons for it. Bearing in mind that this is a personal choice, and that people will have their views obviously known, and I'm sure all of us have actually heard that over the course of the campaign. But one is, when you look at the specific bill, it refers to a dose of medication or medicine. And the definition really is kind of at odds with what the purpose of that is. You know, the practical approach to medication or medicine is to assist or to cure an ill or something, not, as someone has said, put someone down. So that's the first fundamental issue that I have with it in terms of the drafting of the legislation. The second is a level of discomfort for me around a piece of legislation effectively being subject to a vote. I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. Members of Parliament are elected by the community to make laws. There are a number of tools in which that can assist them or guide them in making the legislation, along with the select committee process. So while I am supportive of euthanasia, the bill itself has too many flaws for me to support it. So my personal view will be to vote no.
It's an interesting subject, isn't it? It's very divisive. I've been a health professional for 32 years, and I've never seen anybody assisted to die. I have relieved suffering, but that's not anything else except what we already do. Personally, I'm not actually going to tell you which way I'm going to vote, because I think that between sex, religion, politics, cannabis, the right to die, perhaps it's all personal preference. What I do believe is democracy, and that New Zealand people, all of you, all of us, are going to make a decision about this either way. And in our democracy, we're going to have to look at that and make some decisions around that. What I also know is that there are rules and regulations that need to be in place, regardless of whatever bill of law goes through. And that I don't think that anybody actually wants anybody to die, but I'm pretty sure most of us would like the choice to relieve our suffering. Thank you.
Question down here, Brian, thank you.
My name is Mary, and I would like to ask the people, why in this great country that we think is God's own, are we unable to break the cycle of child and family poverty, and what's your party going to do about it?
Who would like to begin? David?
All right, well...
Sorry, David, before you start, can I say this is the last question. By the time they've answered, we'll be at our deadline.
We believe one of the most important things we have in New Zealand is family. And we believe a family that is strong, healthy, has got a vision for themselves, has plans for the future, has dreams, is one of the most important things that we can have in New Zealand. Sadly, for many families, those dreams do not exist beyond Wednesday week or the next benefit day. One of the problems we have with welfare in New Zealand is that we've created, I think in many, many cases, a class of poverty, which is very, very sad. We've got to find ways that bring everybody in the family a future, a dream, a way forward in their lives, so that we can use welfare as a step up, or if you like, a hand up and not a handout. I know it's a hackneyed expression, but it's very, very true. If you constantly don't give anybody a future or a path ahead or a view or a dream, then nothing is going to happen. They're going to stay in a welfare situation. And the welfare, while it should be used as a hand up, it should not be a long-term permanent thing. A New Conservative believes in family, strengthened families, which means work, which means employment, which means a life. And all I ask you is, on the way out tonight, pick up a brochure from the table, look at the website, what the policies are, and give it some very serious thought.
I've really been scratching my head on this one because I hear Jacinda Ardern talking about successes in terms of child poverty or the conditions of poverty for children, and I just honestly don't see signs of progress. I'm really scratching, I'm really looking for it. One of the things that I've been involved in, I started off at 19 as a secondary school teacher, and I have been involved in youth education for 43 years, and the main thing I do is build the confidence of young people to actually vision, to actually have a dream, to actually think that their creativity and their spirit matters. And so I feel that a society that actually fosters more of that is something that is really important and needs to be some indicator of the health and the well-being generally of society. So those young people grow up to be parents themselves. So that's one of the reasons why I'm working with young people, and I say young people are between 20 to 40. That's how old I've become. And one of the things is to actually have a hope, have a dream, have something that they really, a society that they really feel is supporting them and backing them. I know I've deviated a little bit, but I think it's really critical.
Thank you.
The reason I say I'm one of New Zealand's top youth policy developers is because last year the New Zealand Business Parliament Trust issued a challenge to all youth MPs and to young people in our country. How does the public sector better work with the private sector to deal with an issue of your choice? And to make it easy for myself, I chose intergenerational poverty, just a small one to tackle. National takes a very clear approach. If you are born into a household where your family do not own a home, your family don't have an opportunity for a good job, you're in a cycle of benefit dependency, that child does not have the same opportunities or the same start in life as somebody who comes from a different home. I believe in equity. We need to support people who are disadvantaged and who struggle at the bottom to give them an opportunity to break the cycle and to get out of poverty. The first thing we have to do is education. It is crucial, and that's why I'm really proud of our announcement last week to provide 1,000 science, technology, engineering and mathematics scholarships per year to young people from low decile schools, providing children who are talented, who are willing to work hard and who have the ability, a pathway into high-paying employment and a pathway into an exciting new future. One of the things National introduced in our last term was the Gateways program, which recognises that actually university doesn't work for everyone. Some students it's great for. Students like myself, I enjoy the university life, I enjoy studying, I enjoy that style of learning, but actually I've got mates of mine who would much rather be swinging a hammer, be building a house, be plumbing a house, be working electricity, or be working on the power lines or the rails. So what we need to do is give people an opportunity to explore their passions and to find gainful employment where they can. One of the other pillars is housing. And I've talked about that extensively today, but the flow-on impact from getting more houses built, whether that's by the private sector, the public sector, or community housing, is that we have lower rents, meaning that people have a chance to save and get ahead, but it also means that more people have an opportunity to purchase into home ownership. And that is an incredibly important part about building that asset base to get yourself off the ground and create a future for yourself. So it's about education, it's about housing, and it's about providing opportunities for young people to break that cycle and to get themselves into a position where they can succeed and they can thrive. And that's what I'm going to do as your MP if I'm elected come October the 17th. I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for our next generation. Thank you.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Well done. Child poverty and poverty in general is an incredibly complex issue. New Zealand has historically, if you go in the past, we were the land of milk and honey. We are God's own. Sadly, if you actually look at the economic policies of successive governments, they have slowly but surely eroded that. As a party, political party, New Zealand First has stood on the ramparts and in government and out of government, in opposition on many occasions, and pointed out to the big parties what their economic policies have done. It's all well and good, everyone stands up here and goes, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We've put more into the last 3 years of trying to reverse child poverty than we ever have. What you need is you need us back in the engine room, keeping them honest, being practical, being the common sense party. You also need to realise that we're trying to unravel years and years of slash and burn. And it all goes all the way back to 87. but I'm sure you guys know that because judging by a little bit of colour I've got here and most of the audience, you'll probably remember Rogernomics. Party Vote New Zealand first, we'll keep them honest. Thanks.
One of the key factors, I think, is how you measure child poverty. So we can, out in our community, talk about circumstances that might exist, but the measurement of that, I think, is a really important question. And so what Labor has done is it amended the Public Finance Act to ensure that as part of its annual budgeting process, that there were child poverty measures that were put in place so that we would be able to monitor that. And when you're looking at 9 of those measures, 7 of those 9 have improved whilst we have been in office. The opposition would like to suggest that they haven't, but what they have included in their calculations is the final year that they were in office, which was a rather disappointing record, shall we say. In terms of a practical approach, the expansion of, for example, the Lunches in Schools program, which will mean an additional 200,000 children go to school, being able to eat, having energy to face their day. An increase in income levels for families in whānau, such as a minimum wage increase, alongside benefits being lifted across the board by a minimum of $25 a week. That puts more money in the pockets of those where child poverty stats are probably at most risk. So that alongside working with, the sad reality I think is that Māori are overrepresented in those stats. And so it's around working alongside in a collaborative and form of partnership with local iwi, hapu and others to continue on a journey to get those figures down. Just under 18,500 children have come out of poverty based on the indicators. That is not good enough. We still have work to do, and under Labor, that's exactly what you will get. So party vote Labor.
Kia ora. So we've got a poverty action plan, and if you get onto our website, take a look at all the different details of it. And you need to read our poverty action plan in conjunction with all the other plans we've got that we've talked about, around about clean energy, around making sure that our oceans are clean, around Nature's for Jobs, because it's all of our plans kind of wrap around trying to bring thriving communities. So the way that we see poverty is, the way that you can solve poverty is actually by putting money in people's pockets. We believe that everyone deserves to live with dignity, and the Green Party knows that this is possible with a fair approach to income support and taxation. One of the policy successes of New Zealand is superannuation, and what we do is we actually set that at the poverty level. So it's around about $400 or $300 plus change. So that's the bare minimum. And at the moment, the job seeker benefit is at $225. And now the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, which is one of the groups that were formed over this government, had a good look at this issue, and it recommended that we lift benefits because money in the pocket is actually what gets people out of poverty. We also have to think about this in the context of COVID as well. I've seen numbers from 50,000 to 70,000. People start to lose their jobs because of the economic downturn as well. So I'm really mindful that people will be needing more and more assistance. So what we're advocating for is to ensure that there is a guaranteed minimum income of $325 per week for students as well and people out of work no matter what. So if you're a student looking for work, you will also be covered by the guaranteed minimum income. We also want to introduce a universal child benefit for each child under 3 of $100 per week, and also replace Working for Families tax credits with a family support credit of $190 per week for the first child and $120 per week for each younger child. Party vote Green.
Thank you. This seems an appropriate time to finish. Our young people are in the kitchen, some of them wanting to serve you tea and coffee if you would like it. The candidates will be available in the foyer. They have literature there and available for you to talk with them further. Can I say on behalf of us, thank you to the candidates who've been here tonight. I certainly appreciate the fact that these people are putting themselves forward to serve our community. Whatever we might think about their particular views, they are willing to participate in our democracy and represent us, put themselves there, which probably isn't everybody's favourite activity, but especially at this time of the year. So I want to thank you very much. for doing that, and I assure you of the prayerful support of our church to do the very best you can to serve our community. And can I thank you too for being a respectful audience and for the way that you have engaged. So thank you for being here tonight. Have a good evening. You're welcome. Great. Thank you. Well done. Well spoken.